Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. I'm going to answer 20 plus questions on seed starting indoors. Just taking questions that come up in the comments from people watching my different videos. I have a 2020 seed starting series going on. That's where I've collected these questions that have about 16 videos if you want to check that out. But let's get started with the green growth right over there. The question I get is, that green growth on top of my seed starting mix a problem? And the answer is no. That's just plain algae. And even if you sterilize the seed starting mix, I'll talk about that as one of the questions, because there's actually algae in the water, we're using these intense lights, you're going to get green algae growth. And once you do a light feeding of a fertilizer in there, you add nitrogen, that will really begin to show. So having the green algae on your starting mix surface is not a problem. Question number 2, how do you water your seed starts, or how do you take care of them? You can see right here the top of the soil mix is nice and light. It's a light brown. I haven't planted in here yet. I water by filling the bottom of the tray. All your containers should always have holes. About a quarter of the way, fill it full of water. In 20 or 30 minutes, the water should wick up and turn all of this to a dark brown. That means that your seed starting mix is saturated. After 20 or 30 minutes, whatever's left in there, just dump out. If this isn't turned to a dark brown, add a little bit more water. Third question, can I just pour water into here and let it sit? And the answer to that is no. If you overfill this with water and you let the water sit in here, you can get something that's called root rot with your plants. And basically, short version is there's too much water there, gets rid of the air that's in a nice loose starting mix, and your roots die off. So you want your plant to go through a drying period. Here's an example. So right up here, and the question would be, should I let my seed starch dry out a little bit? And the answer is yes. To control problems like fungus and molds and even a little bit of the algae that I just showed you, you want the top of your soil to dry like that. That's beginning to dry. You can see it's a mix of light and dark brown. This is fully saturated over here. When this becomes completely light, you can let it go for 1, 2, or even 3 days. And the reason being is that some of your plants like the soil to dry out. They prefer not to be wet all the time. But when the top dries, there's plenty of moisture down here at the lower part of the cell. So it dries from the top down, and the root systems will get down here, still be able to pull up water. So you let the tops dry for a day or 2 or 3, and that helps manage issues in your garden. And for plants like rosemary or lavender, they really prefer to dry out. Okay, next question. I often get the question, can I grow fruits and vegetables indoors using these lights? And the answer to that generally is no. We're not growing plants to flowering, to fruiting, to producing using these light setups. We're just growing transplants. So we're growing them in here from anywhere from 4 weeks to 12 weeks to get them established, develop nice root systems, get some nice leaf growth, and they're going out into the garden. So we're using the lights to grow transplants, not fruits, not flowers, not vegetables. There's some variation to that, like you can use these lights for growing leafy greens, but you really can't use them for tomatoes and peppers and such. Alright, so the next question, what kind of light should I use? Generally speaking, and you can check out my playlist, I'll go over the lighting in more detail. I recommend these 4-foot receptacles, and they either have LED lights in them or 4-foot fluorescent tubes. Either one works. I've been doing this for 20 years. What you want is to make sure your lights have these 2 ratings, a Kelvin rating of 5,000 to 6,500 K. Kelvin only goes up to 6,500 K. That's the range that mimics daylight, the color of daylight. So try and get 6,500 K. If you can't find that, don't go below 5,000 K. When you get to a lower number in Kelvin, it's just not the right color. You want daylight, bright daylight, 5,000 to 6,500 Kelvin. The other rating that we use is called lumens, and you can see the intensity here. You want your bulbs to be rated at 2,000 lumens or higher. That's usually what the fluorescent tubes come in. You can find the LED lights, like right there. They go all the way up to 5,000 lumens or more. So with the decrease in price in LEDs, you can get your grow lights that have up to 5,000 lumens. That's a really nice light intensity. Now the question that goes along with this is, do I need those red LED lights, those blue LED lights? Do I need all these different color spectrums? And for transplants, like I'm doing here, the answer is no. 20 years, been doing it with these colored lights. You may need those lights if you want, again, your plants to fruit and flower, but you can just go with LED lights, fluorescent lights with a 5,000 to 6,500 Kelvin and a 2,000 lumens rating or higher. Sticking with lighting, when you are first seed starting, the question I get is, do I have to turn the lights on? And in theory, you don't. You could wait and catch them as soon as you see one little seed. And here they are, my pepper plants. If you see one little pepper seed begin to break the surface, turn the lights on. But if you miss this for some reason, say you get busy and you forget to turn your lights on, and all your seeds germinate and they're up out of the ground for 24 hours without any light, they're going to get tall and skinny, and that's called legginess. They believe they're still in the soil, it's dark, and they grow and spend all their energy to grow tall and get to lights. So I recommend keeping the lights on. They're not expensive anymore. They just don't use a lot of electricity. And the question is, so how long do you leave them on for? So I turn them on once I slide these under here, even though the seeds may not germinate for 5 or 7 days. And then I leave them on at germination, and then once they germinate for 10 to 14 days after germination, I leave them on for 16 hours, and then they're off for 8 hours. They need a dark cycle. That's another question. Do you have to, can you leave the lights on 24 hours? No, you need a dark cycle for your plants, and that's at least 8 hours of darkness. So this is my germination side. Light should be, question number whatever we're on, 1 to 3 inches above your seed starting mix. If you have higher lumens, you have the LEDs that are brighter, you can raise that up to 4 inches, even 5 inches. But generally speaking, 1 to 3 inches is a perfect height for your lights when you're germinating. All right, the next question. Well, after they germinated and they've been growing for, say, 10 to 14 days, what do I do with the lights? Well, after that, you can change the lights. You can raise them to be about 6 inches above the plants, and the lights can stay on 12 to 14 hours, and they'll be off for 10 to 12 hours. And then they can just stay under there, really, for the duration. Now, as your plants get larger, when your plants get larger and they get something like to this size, you can use just a single light to kind of keep them going. Usually by this time, your plants are larger, they're getting closer to go outside, and this is the time you would be acclimating them. I'll talk about that in a second. But when your plants get larger, they just don't need as much light to keep going. You could even put them by a window that gets some light, and they're going to be okay. So you've spent 6, 8, 10 weeks growing them. They're to this size. So that question that I was leading up to is acclimation. What does that mean? Acclimation means you have to get your plants used to being indoors with no intense sun. Without sun hitting them, they're not really immune or protected against the UV rays from the sun. When plants grow outside, their UV protection kind of gets started right at the beginning, and the sun doesn't bother them. Because these plants haven't really been hit by wind and by sun, if you put these right outside, planted them day one, sun comes along, 8 hours, 12 hours of intense sun, it's going to burn all the leaves and damage your plants. So you have to acclimate them to the outdoors. That varies greatly. When your plants are this big, you really want to start transitioning them outside for 15 or 20 minutes a day, increasing the time over a 7 to 10 day period, and let them get used to the UV rays from the sun, let them get used to the temperature change, let them get used to the wind. Here's a question related to that too. Is there another way to acclimate them? Do I have to spend 7 or 10 days transitioning my plants outdoors? And the answer is no. When your plants first, and I've been doing this more over the last couple of years, when your plants first break the surface like this, maybe even a couple days ago, take them outside at this size when it's above 40 degrees, let them get the sun for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. When they're young, they have the UV protection. What you're doing is you're going to take these out, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times during the week, give them sun. They build the UV protection as they grow. And you do this over the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks that they're here. By the time they get to size and they look big like this, you don't have to transition them outdoors. You were doing it the whole time. Let's go back up to these plants. These are my cool weather crops. They were right over here because they're just germinating under the lights. I've been moving stuff around as I've been watering. The question I get is a lot of times your cabbages, broccolis, cauliflower, kales, when you seed start them, tend to get leggy and they've been under lights just like the rest of the plants. Why is that? These are cool weather crops. Because you're starting them where it's warm, 65 degrees, 70 degrees, they just love the heat. So when they germinate, they're growing really fast and they're just getting tall and leggy because of the warmth. Normally they germinate outside when it's cooler. The way that you can prevent your cool weather crops from getting too leggy when they're indoors is take this out right now and give it some 40 to 50 degree weather for a day. Again, remember, because they're young, they can handle the sun, put them out on a cloudy day. That cool weather will help them slow down a little bit and they'll be nice and stocky while you grow your plants indoors. Shifting over here, I have rosemary right in the front there, and then in the back is my lavender, and it's germinated really well. Question I get is my rosemary, my lavender doesn't germinate. What am I doing wrong? These are 2 varieties of plants where the seeds really do well if you stick them in a refrigerator for 10 to 14 days. Let them get cold. There's an enzyme in the seeds that breaks down when it's cold, and you want to break that enzyme down so that when you plant them you get better germination, and that's called stratification. So lavender and rosemary are 2 plant varieties that really benefit from stratification. All right, let's talk about the containers, your seed cells when you start. Question I get is, do I have to pot up? Do I have to start in these smaller cells and then pot my plants up into larger containers like the ones over here? And the answer to that is no, if you're not starting a lot of plants. I have a 4-rack system here. I start hundreds, 400, 500, 600 plants. So I start in these smaller cells so that I can get more under the lights and I can get more started, and then I transition them on a basic timeline to this side and then outside. So I have a plan set up. But if you're just doing a couple of flats and you're just doing a smaller garden, you can start, I sell these at my seed shop, you can start in these bigger cells and your tomatoes and peppers can stay in there for the whole time. You don't have to pot them up from starting your peppers or tomatoes in this, and then as they get bigger they go into a larger container. So it really all depends on what you're deciding to grow. Growing a lot of plants, you probably need to start in the smaller cells. If you're growing fewer, you can even start your peppers and tomatoes right in here. Just let them grow and then take them out into the garden. A general question, can I grow mint? Can I grow flowers? Can I grow strawberries indoors? And the answer to that is yes. Right back there in the far left corner are strawberry plants. They've been growing for about 10 weeks. They grow slowly. The taller cell back there, that's mint. When we come down here, this is all mint that's been potted up. These are all different kinds of flowers here on the right side, and these are columbines right in the front there. So you can grow mints, you can grow strawberries, you can grow flowers, you can grow just about anything indoors, or start them indoors. And again, remember, these are being grown for transplants. Another question I get, but not often, is I'm growing onions indoors, and when you grow onions you want to start them early. I go over an overseeding method, but the question I get is, can I give them a haircut? Well, yes. After about 8 weeks, 10 weeks growth, you're going to have all this top growth. These aren't ready to go out into the garden for about another 4 weeks. You can cut these down by half, leave an inch or two. All you're doing really when you're doing onion seed starts and leek seed starts, leeks are actually on the right, is you just want a nice root system. And you're going to pull them apart and then plant them into the ground when the season's right. So you can cut the onions back, leaving about 2 inches, from the soil surface. Another general question I get is, how do I put my seed trays under the lights, or how do I set up the lights for my seed trays? And I use two, space them out a little bit in the middle, and you can see that it gives a nice light coverage across the shelves. Now you can go ahead and just slide them in this way if you're trying to really start a lot and you want to save room. And you basically would need to slide these back and forth. Just rotate them a little bit every other day, and that helps with the light coverage. But if you have the space, the best way to do it is really turn them on the side, and then you don't need to move them. They're getting plenty of light. That's a great way for them to germinate, and that's what I'm doing down there. As they get bigger, you can just turn them like this, and you can start setting in more trays. Now, some people say, I don't want to go through all the seed starting mix. I don't want to use those cells. Can I grow in peat pellets? Well, what are peat pellets? And when you go to the stores, you find these compressed pellets that expand into something like this. And these are the smaller ones. That's all oregano growing in there. It's oregano, cucumbers. This is for an experiment. Don't start your cucumbers in these. There's a tomato back there, peppers. So you can just use these compressed peat pellets. They come flat. They look like a silver dollar. You add hot water. They pop up just like this. And then you just scrape away a little bit of the surface, plant your seed, and they're good to go. And you bottom water. Another question I get is, when do I fertilize my seed starts? I do not anymore really add anything into my starting mix except for worm castings. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but it is a great way to really add in what nature wants into your seed starting mix. So when your plants get to about an inch tall, or if it's been 10 to 14 days after germination, you can give them a very, 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 very light feeding of any water-soluble fertilizer. Within this question, do chemical fertilizers hurt my plants? No. So you can use those if that's all you can find. I do recommend the organic fertilizers, but whatever one you choose, make sure you try and bring it down to a 1-1-1 NP&K. And that means you usually have to cut the dosing down by a good 3/4 or so. Because these are such small cells, even the bigger ones, you don't want fertilizer concentrating in here because it's going to cause problems. Just a slow, or just a low feeding of a water-soluble fertilizer is all you need. How often do you do it? After the first dosing, anywhere from 7 to 14 days. As your plants get bigger, it'll be more often. When they're small, less often. Fungus gnat questions. So I don't have any fungus gnats right now, and I've been growing indoors. Today's February 6th or 7th, since the middle of December. And the way that you avoid fungus gnats is to sterilize your seed starting mix. We'll get to that in a second. You want to use starting mix. It's sterile. There's no soil life in there. You don't want any soil life in there for seed starting. You just want a loose soil to get germination started, a nice loose starting mix, that is, so that your root systems develop, air can get in there, and your plants can establish. We are not worried about the microbiology at this point. Now, I do add in worm castings. That helps out, but I put the worm castings in after I dump my seed starting mix into a container, and then I hydrate it with boiling water. I really soak the boiling water through there. I press it down, compact it, and let that heat kill off any fungus gnat eggs. Fungus gnat eggs can survive freezes. They just hang out in the seed starting mix, and then when you bring them into these wonderful temperatures, the eggs hatch and you end up with fungus gnats. So sterilize your seed starting mix. After you sterilize it, if you want to add in some worm castings to add in some nutrients, a little bit of microbiology, you can go ahead and do that. But you don't have to worry about that until these plants are bigger, they're getting potted up, they're going outside. You know, when they get into the ground, they're going to love, you know, the natural ecosystem that's there. Sterilize your seed starting mix, it stops fungus gnats. I have a full video on this, but the general question is when do I seed start indoors? The number one mistake people make is they start everything at the same time. All your different plant varieties are going to grow at different times, and they need different soil temperature. Generally speaking, you can plan seed starting by figuring out when your outdoor soil temperature regularly stays at about 50 degrees. That's warm enough. And then you count backwards from that date, anywhere from 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, depending on what you're growing. For instance, if you're growing peppers, you want to start 8 to 10 weeks before that 50 degree average night temperature arrives. If you're growing tomatoes, you want to figure out that 50 degree, again, average temperature of the soil at night. Count back 6 or 8. Cool weather crops, you can put them into the ground when it's cooler, but to keep it simple, you can still be thinking 50 degrees, and you start them 4 to 6 weeks before they would go out into the ground. So you really are planning when you start your seeds based on the variety, how long it needs to grow, and when they would go out into that 50 degree average warmth soil. Do I need an elaborate setup of lights and shelves to seed start plants indoor? And the answer is no. Nowadays you can pick up something like this. This is about 20 bucks, 6,500 lumens, I think 6,000 Kelvin, bright enough to manage your plants. Now these are larger, of course, but you just set it up so that you can slide this down closer to the seed starts when they're germinating, and then you raise it up when they're bigger. And when your plants are bigger, they don't need as much light, and you can manage something like this. This is perfect size, you know, for a small garden if you want to start indoors and you don't want to spend a lot of money. I think I answered quite a few questions on seed starting indoors. Please check out the playlist. It'll be linked in the video description and throughout the video, and you can get more details on starting your seeds indoors. These questions came from comments, so if I missed anything, please just leave it in the comment. I'll answer it there, and then I'll jot it down and I will answer it in a future video. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. And if you're just thinking about starting seeds indoors, give it a try. Start on a small scale. You'll really enjoy it, and it's really rewarding taking your plants that you start from seeds indoors and getting them out into your garden. Thanks so much for watching.